Whether it's an economic challenge, public health crisis, a natural disaster, governments have to withstand those shocks, but they also have to learn and evolve from them. And resident engagement is really critical because it ensures that governments they're really connected to the real-time needs and concerns of their constituents. Those residents then feel heard and involved. That creates and builds trust. And that is kind of the cycle, right, that enables governments to respond more effectively, and those residents become partners in resilience.
From Tyler Technologies, this is the Tyler Tech Podcast, where we explore the trends, technologies, and people shaping public sector innovation today. I'm Josh Henderson, part of the corporate marketing team here at Tyler. Thanks for joining us. Each episode, we bring you thought-provoking conversations on the tools and strategies driving our communities forward. If you enjoy our podcast, please consider subscribing, giving us a 5-star rating, and sharing the show with others. In today's episode, we're talking about resilience, how governments can recover from disruptions, adapt to challenges, and continue delivering critical services while maintaining public trust. Whether it's responding to natural disasters, managing cybersecurity threats, or ensuring seamless operations during crises, resilience is the key to thriving in today's complex digital world. And joining us is Cate Ryba, Director of Resident Engagement at Tyler. Cate will discuss how technology empowers governments to strengthen operations, engage residents, and foster trust through transparent communication and innovative solutions. She'll also highlight real-world examples of these strategies in action, demonstrating how governments can turn challenges into opportunities for growth. So let's get right into my conversation with Cate Ryba. We hope you enjoy the episode. All right, Cate, thanks so much for joining me today on the Tyler Tech Podcast.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here, Josh.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you on the show. I'm hoping you can share your perspective on what resilience means for governments today and why resident engagement is such a critical component of it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when you think about different types of resilience within governments, there are a lot of different types, right? So some you might not think of. People sometimes go immediately to disaster recovery, but there are also things like organizational resilience. So how can your governmental organization resist, absorb, recover, and adapt to an ever-changing and increasingly complex environment to deliver to its residents? There's also operational resilience. How will your service delivery to your residents be impacted during disruptions? People talk a lot about IT and cyber resilience. You think about cyber attacks on governments that can cripple them, right? So what are the redundancy mechanisms and security that you're building into your infrastructure and your systems to make sure you can still operate in those disruptive times? I'm a big fiscal policy geek, so I think about fiscal resilience. How does your governmental organization plan for unexpected financial hurdles, things like, property tax loss after a natural disaster or sales tax loss? And then you get to the natural disaster recovery that kind of, is a big piece of resilience. So how do you make sure that you as a government can still serve your residents with critical IT infrastructure and your systems and your operations after a disaster? So governments today, they really need to be adaptive, they need to be proactive and responsive to the changing needs in your communities. So whether it's an economic challenge, public health crisis, a natural disaster, governments have to withstand those shocks, but they also have to learn and evolve from them. And resident engagement is really critical because it ensures that governments they're really connected to the real-time needs and concerns of their constituents. Those residents then feel heard and involved. That creates and builds trust. And that is kind of the cycle, right, that enables governments to respond more effectively, and those residents become partners in resilience. They can provide those on-the-ground insights. They can amplify messages to others in their community during these critical times. So it's really a symbiotic relationship. Residents depending on governments for those resources and that support, and then governments relying on residents for feedback and collaboration.
I think that's such a great starting off point, and we'll kind of feed into everything that we touch on today in the conversation. So thank you for that. Technology obviously is increasingly becoming a bridge between governments and communities. What are some major ways technology can ensure residents have the resources and information they need during a crisis?
Yeah, so technology really plays a transformative role in connecting governments and communities. We've come a long way in the past 20 years to responding to crisis using technology. So some of those examples might be having a mobile app to serve your residents can be a really effective real-time communication tool. Things like SMS alerts, your social media channels to share timely updates and emergencies. You really have to have all those different funnels of that real-time communication to your residents. Another piece of the puzzle is having centralized access to services and resources and having residents understand where that is and what that is before a disaster ever occurs. So whether it's applying for assistance, reporting damages, finding shelters, having that information all in one place is really helpful in a difficult, traumatic time for your residents. I mentioned that feedback loop, that symbiotic relationship. So making sure that the technology you have in place really empowers residents to report issues, request help instantly. And that gives you, the government, an actionable data point to prioritize and address those urgent needs. And then, I mentioned data, the data-driven decisions are a big piece of the puzzle here. So having those analytic tools to help your as a government understand the community needs, allocating resources efficiently and effectively, being able to do retrospectives and look back like, what was the data coming in? How do we respond? How can we do better next time? Is really important when you're thinking about what technology tools you're using. And then finally, emergency preparedness. So, not only facilitating communications during a time of disruption or disaster, but also creating that sense of preparedness up front for residents so that they feel supported and informed when it matters most.
Yeah, and developing that expertise and kind of finding out those data points from a product perspective, you need to take consideration of real world applications of this type of thing. So I wanted to next discuss Louisiana and Louisiana's use of Tyler's resident engagement platform as it relates to strengthening disaster preparedness and response. And Cate, what made this platform so effective in fostering resilience in the state of Louisiana?
Yeah, this is a really great story. So the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness worked with Tyler last summer to put a mobile app in place ahead of hurricane season. It's called Get a Game Plan. You can find it in the App Store, in the Google Store, the Google Play Store. And essentially what the app, their focus was, how can we have that emergency preparedness guide? So what I mentioned just at the end of my last answer, how can we set people up for success during the coming hurricane season? So doing things like allowing users in the app to build a custom list of emergency supply needs. Those are based, actually, they can base it on their family size, their family type. They can find locations for shelters. They can look at all the social media channels that are relevant to them. For example, the governor's office, the National Weather Center, all of those in one place rather than having to go search them out during a time of emergency. The emergency numbers that they might need are consolidated all in one place. So, and those are available offline. And that's really important to have because oftentimes cellular service goes out, there's no internet, there's no power. So having a consolidated place where you can find all the critical information in an emergency is really important for your residents. And then another piece that they used were push notifications. So sending information about evacuation routes and updating people about the progress of Hurricane Helene that indeed came a few months after the app was put into place. So they saw, they were able to use the data from the back end of the app to see that during that peak time of Hurricane Helene, there were about 40,000 sessions. So people were really robustly using the app. And then following that disaster, they were able to also use the app to access things like Small Business Association, recovery loans, FEMA resources, and where the locations are of FEMA offices. So again, it's just having all of the information in one place and preparing ahead. That they were really forward looking to have that in place. And unfortunately, Hurricane Helene occurred. but they were ready from a technology perspective to serve the residents of the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, obviously not ideal situation, but as long as residents are prepared and know how to seek out those resources, that's critically important and will continue to be moving forward. I'm wondering if you can share any other stories or examples where technology directly improved outcomes for residents during a crisis.
Yeah, I have a personal story, actually. This past week, we had a severe cold front and a winter storm in the south and the southeast, which is where I live. And as of late last week, there was actually, at least one confirmed death due to the storm. So getting information to residents can really be a matter of life and death. And you need to use, as I mentioned, every communication channel available to you as a government to reach them. So I saw dozens of my clients sending out safety information, public building closings, locations for warming centers, and other weather information using those push notifications. And over the past week too, for example, I saw the city of Pelham, Alabama, one of my clients, send out push notifications to their residents for about a number of things, including, a cold weather advisory, changes to their city hall hours of operation, how are the road conditions. They ended up sending a push notification with links to outage maps for power outages due to the storm. And we know from talking to our Tyler public safety clients that some of the top 911 calls that their dispatch receives during a storm like this can be from residents reporting and asking about power outages. Your power goes out, you don't think, okay, I need to go find the website of the power company and report things always. You're just really worried and you call 911. So being able to send residents this information through their apps to report their outages, to find out more information instead of calling 911, that freed up, dispatches to address more critical calls during a crisis. So that's just one example of how outcomes can be improved by having that, that immediate reaction with technology during a crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious to get your take on what lessons you feel like other governments can learn from these real world applications to sort of enhance their own resilience strategies.
Yeah, I think I sound like a broken record here a little bit, but there isn't one size fits all approach to informing residents. You really have to think about all the different communications channels possible to reach your residents. So somebody might be comfortable with, looking at their mobile app. Somebody else might prefer to get a text message. Others love their email newsletters, or, and other of your residents are always on Nextdoor or they're always on Facebook. So you have to be on those channels as well. So I really think, from a government perspective, you have to have a communication strategy and think from that no one size fits all approach and find all those different channels and meet people where they are. And I think in the case of extreme disasters, using technology is also really important to coordinate with public safety and other organizations who might be conducting door-to-door evacuation alerts. Using technology to make things as efficient as possible can have those real world impacts for safety and health for your residents. So again, they're all different approaches, but I think it's kind of like you have to try everything. And it's tough from, having worked in local government myself. You'll always have someone say, well, I didn't see anything about that. But you really have to, just scattershot and use as many different channels as possible to find your way to your residents.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of the Tyler Tech Podcast. Hey there, Tyler Tech Podcast listeners. Have you heard the buzz? Our annual user conference, Tyler Connect 2025, is officially on the horizon. And I'm here with my colleague Jay Champion with some exciting news to share.
That's right. Early registration is now open, and trust us, you don't want to miss this. Mark your calendars for May 11th through May 14th, 2025, because we're heading back to sunny San Antonio, Texas.
I can picture it already. The unique charm of historic Market Square, the vibrant Riverwalk, and of course, the iconic Alamo. And let's be honest, it's not just the location that makes Tyler Connect a must-attend event.
Absolutely. Tyler Connect is one of the largest gatherings of public sector professionals, and it's your chance to collaborate with peers who are solving challenges with innovative solutions. It's packed with product training, network opportunities, and inspiration to help you and your team thrive.
Whether you're a first-timer or a Connect veteran, this conference always delivers. And let's not forget, you'll leave with new knowledge, practical tools, and meaningful connections to apply in your work and share with your teams.
Head to tylertech.com/connect to take advantage of our early registration pricing, which secures your spot for an unforgettable time in San Antonio.
We can't wait to see you at Tyler Connect 2025, a place to empower, collaborate, and imagine what's possible for the public sector, all in the heart of Texas. Now let's get back to the Tyler Tech Podcast. As you've certainly alluded to, public trust is essential during disruptions, and whether that's a natural disaster or a cyber attack or whatever it might be, that public trust is essential in the response to that. So how can transparent communication solutions help governments establish trust with their communities?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my advice, I'm a former city councilor. So I've been in that role where you're needing to build that trust and communicate with your residents. And so my advice would be communicating early and often. This is really what leaders have to do. And in this age of, we have a fractured media landscape. Governments really need to utilize, like I mentioned this just a minute ago, every way possible to reach their residents with critical information. Governments really need to have a comprehensive communications plan way before the disaster ever occurs. And this is just as important as making plans to keep your roads open, to ensuring access to critical infrastructure, to providing public safety. That communications plan is as important as those things. And they need to include things like early warnings across every platform that your residents have access to. The example we just mentioned with Louisiana, it's really preparing people. So 97% of people in the US actually have access to smartphones. So making sure that you have an app or some mobile approach to reaching people alongside SMS texts, web-based updates, phone calls, all those things are important. When the internet is out, people can still use their phones as a tool. Even when cell service is down, Louisiana's Get a Game Plan app, it has that critical information that I mentioned all in one place online. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, so I'm really familiar with this challenge. I know during Hurricane Helene, I did not have cell service for about 2 weeks and no internet for longer than that. So, I had neighbors that were putting out chalkboards with information about which highways were open and where to get water and where to find gas. All we had was a radio announcement to get information. So if I had had an app where all that emergency preparedness information could have been in one place offline, that would have been really helpful for me. So every government needs to be ready for the worst. We didn't expect a hurricane in the mountains, but it's like all governments need to prepare for all scenarios, which sounds really difficult, but using technology can make it a lot easier. And that's the way that you build trust way before a disaster happens. When your resident uses technology that you're offering them, for example, to report a pothole or a code violation, and then they see, oh, that issue's been resolved and my government's communicated back to them. This really builds trust with not only the technology itself, but it helps residents really see, hey, my government's listening to me, and they're reacting and they're communicating with me. And having that two-way feedback loop, it really lays the groundwork for residents to seek out the tools that they're comfortable with, and then they use those to find that information during disruptions and disasters. And like I said, speaking from experience with living through Hurricane Helene, the human brain really goes into autopilot during times of disruption and times of trauma. So making your residents really familiar with the tools that you're offering and getting them to trust the communications that you've been sharing with them way prior to a disruption or a disaster, it makes it so much easier, and they'll be more likely to trust you and remember, hey, I'm going to use this technology and these services that you're providing during that disruption or disaster.
Yeah, it's such an interesting perspective that you bring, because you're somebody who works in the space, and you're also somebody who's experienced something so closely. It's in the place that you live. How can governments use data-driven tools to better understand those resident needs and improve decision-making during emergencies?
Yeah. So, having that tools that provide a two-way communication loop, like I just mentioned with residents. One of the great things is, tools that I know we have at Tyler, you're able to see, for example, what are the top issues that residents are reporting in general? And then what are the ones they're reporting during emergencies? You can use data from these apps to be able to see, oh, how many people are accessing this section of this platform. And you can iterate and adjust accordingly to elevate the most viewed and important and useful information that you're providing to your residents. Another piece of the puzzle, I'm trained as a city planner. I'm a big map geek. Governments using tools, for residents to be able to track the geographical locations of reported issues. And then using that data to direct resources and services and adapt to meet the needs based on those reported issues in real time. And then, before a disaster even occurs, things like online survey tools can be really useful, gathering data to determine resident sentiments and needs. This kind of data, it can really drive decision making for even during the budget process for budget priorities and investments in future emergency preparedness. So there are lots of different ways that governments can collect and slice and dice data, but making sure that you're collecting that data and that you have tools to do that is really important to not only serve residents in real time during a disaster, but also to, like I was saying, to be able to look retrospectively, what did we see? How can we do better? How can we improve how we serve our residents?
This has been such a wonderful conversation. As we sort of wind things down, we like to kind of look ahead a little bit as much as we can. I know we can't predict the future, but I'm curious to get some of your takes on what you see as sort of future trends in resident engagement technology that could further enhance resilience.
Sure. I think no one will be surprised to hear me say, first off, that I know that AI-powered tools are going to be a big piece of the puzzle for resident engagement. These kinds of tools can provide instant, personalized responses to resident inquiries, even during high demand periods when your government staff are diverted to deal with disaster response. They can help residents find evacuation routes, apply for aid, get real-time updates during emergencies. Later it also analyze community sentiments and predict potential issues before they escalate. AI is a big piece of the puzzle, I think, going towards the future. I mentioned, geo-specific data. I think having technologies that can, this is a technical term, geofence, which is essentially, hey, can I draw a line around this certain boundary of this neighborhood or this area served by this particular water lift station, and send notifications just to the residents in those areas. So they know, hey, the water service is going to be interrupted for this period of time in my area, and the whole city doesn't get that notification. So people don't get information fatigue and not pay attention when they are asked to evacuate. So having that hyper localized targeted communication, I think, will be a trend and really important. I think, and this is something that we have at Tyler, of having all of your various government departments and having their data talk to each other and having that integrated data ecosystem. I think that's that holistic approach that really you can see all of the data coming in from your different departments in one place and being able to make informed decisions, being able to see it all. I'm a visual person, being able to see a dashboard and make decisions is really important for our government partners. I'm obviously biased as well with mobile first solutions. I think that that's something that, like I said, 97% of people have a smartphone in the US. A lot don't have access to a computer or internet, but they have that cell phone, that smartphone, they have that cell service. So being able to offer a mobile app that has offline capabilities during times of disaster or if you're in an area that's underserved by cell service, having that mobile solution is really important.
That's great. And we will obviously, as this stuff evolves, we will obviously have you back on to kind of detail it all for us. So lastly, Cate, just wanted to leave with some advice that you would give to public sector leaders looking to strengthen resilience in their operations through resident engagement and technology.
Sure. I mean, I think, the most obvious one and the first one I'd share is, listen. I think as a former government employee and a former city councilor, listening to your residents is the number one most important thing that you can do. And so what, technology tools can you employ to get information to your residents, whether it's surveys, it's making sure that if you say you have a mobile app, that your city council meetings or your county commission meetings or are all streamed easily to your residents, that they have a way to communicate back with you, building that two-way communication loop and to make it easy for residents to feel heard and valued is really important. I think investing in scalable and flexible technology. So making sure that the platforms you choose can scale with your community needs and adapt to changing circumstances. So, cloud-based solutions are the way to go for resiliency and to adapt and having flexibility during a crisis, because they really ensure continuous service delivery, even when City Hall isn't open. In the case of some parts of Asheville where like your City Hall isn't there anymore. But your residents are still able to get information they need because it's all in the cloud. I think I mentioned just a minute ago, making sure that, any technology you're using is accessible to your residents, for ADA, anybody with language barriers, offering things like we did this in the city where I worked, free Wi-Fi in public spaces so that people can access information about your community without having to be able to afford to pay for that in their home. Data-driven decision-making, I can't hammer that enough. Being able to identify trends, allocate resources dynamically, making informed decisions, both during, your everyday business, but then also in an emergency and retroactively looking back, and building a data governance framework so that, your residents are seeing the data too, and really seeing that transparency and building that trust. And then, community partnerships are also a big deal. So making sure that, if you're launching a new technology in your community, that you are tapping those leaders in your community to communicate to your residents as well. And you have those trusted voices saying, hey, use this tool that our government is offering to you, and it's a trustworthy endeavor to do so. And then I guess I'd say fostering a culture of innovation is also really important. The product that I work on, one of the great things about it is extremely flexible. So our clients are constantly trying new ways of configuring their products to see, what residents want, what's resonating with them, what are the most useful tools in the app, and they're able to easily and dynamically change those. So, having a kind of growth mindset with your teams to try new technologies to reach people. And then I think I'll lastly say, celebrate your successes, track key metrics related to your resident engagement. We have clients that love to, at every city council meeting, share how many new downloads they have of their resident engagement app, to show, how people are adopting and using the technology in their community. And so sharing those success stories, again, builds that trust and gets people excited about using the technology so that when times are difficult, when there is a disruption, a disaster, that they rely back on that trusted tool to be able to carry them through and really appreciate the infrastructure that's been provided to them by their government.
That's great. And I think that's a great place to wrap up the conversation, Cate. Thank you so much for joining me again. This was such a great conversation, and we hope to have you back on again in the future.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me, Josh.
Thank you for joining us for this conversation with Cate Ryba, Director of Resident Engagement at Tyler Technologies. Resilience is at the heart of effective government operations, enabling communities to recover, adapt, and thrive. By leveraging innovative technology and transparent communication, governments can strengthen their operations and build the public trust essential for navigating challenges. At Tyler, We're committed to supporting public sector organizations with tools and strategies to enhance operational resilience and better serve their communities. If you'd like to learn more about what we discussed today, check out our show notes for additional resources. We'd also love to hear your feedback on today's episode. Let us know your thoughts by filling out the survey linked in the show notes or reaching out to us anytime at podcast@tylertech.com. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast so you won't miss any upcoming episodes, where we'll continue exploring the innovative ways technology is empowering the public sector. For Tyler Technologies, I'm Josh Henderson. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Tyler Tech Podcast.